Hello everyone, welcome to tonight's Friends of Alten evening. Thank you for joining us here. Thank you for your ongoing support. As most of you know, we have the largest public collection of Matthias Alten works in the country. Our gallery is open to the public every Friday and Saturday afternoon, but as a Friend of Alten member, you also get exclusive tour rights. So please contact myself or our team if you'd like to see it, bring guests through. It's always exciting to show. We update those galleries every year, and I'll be sharing a little bit more about some recent updates in a minute. Tonight, I'd like to just thank Barbara Gordon, my co-host. Thank you, Barbara. And also just make the special thanks to our Gordon Gallery Advising Committee. We meet throughout the year, and several of those members are here tonight. So thank you, Don Lubbers. Thank you, Emily Miller. We also have Larry Shea, Marge Potter, and Kim Smith on that committee with Barbara and I. So thank you for your work in helping us figure out how to better position Alten in our community, what kind of events we need to do, how do we celebrate art in general here with our community. My name's Nathan Kemmler, by the way. I'm the Director of Galleries and Collections here at Grand Valley. We have a very kind of broad reaching art collection, but really the gem of that collection is this Matthias Alten collection. It's uniquely positioned in our community, being a regional artist, someone of global and national standings, and we're proud to have this artist in our community that we can showcase year-round. We recently, if you haven't had a chance, please go out and see the first floor gallery on your way out. We recently installed that. It just opened up this week. This new interpretation of Matthias Alten's work on the first floor really stems from our research and scholarship with the artist over many years. We did a traveling exhibit back in 2020 across the state of Michigan, and that scholarship and a lot of that work is now in this first floor gallery. Really the standout piece about this exhibit is that it's layered now with more interpretive information, more historical relevancy is added in. You'll see historical photographs and artifacts, references to world events happening, of course, nationally, but also locally. That really puts Alten in context on what he was painting and why, and the influences of where that work was done. It's incredibly interesting, but also really relevant as you think about how was an artist like Alten responding to the times of his life? How were changes, modernization in particular, affecting him? What was his response to something that we all experience every day, rapidly changing pace of life? New technologies, new ways, new cultures. How do we respond and reflect on that? Tonight, we welcome back Dr. Henry Luttikhuizen. Henry is a professor emeritus of art history at Calvin University. He just recently finished up a scholar in residency position here at Grand Valley for the past 3 years, and has just been recently appointed the new Lena E.S. Meyer Professor of Art History at Aquinas College. Henry has a doctorate and master's in art history from the University of Virginia, is well published, especially in Henry, Belgium, Flemish, Netherlands, art history in particular, but can speak on many topics of art history. We're thrilled to have him back with us tonight. He was here 3 years ago at the beginning of his appointment here at Grand Valley, and we're excited to have him back tonight as he concludes his time here at Grand Valley. So, Henry, thank you, and I'll turn it over to you.
What Nathan didn't tell you is he's my former student. And so I had him for 4 long, hard years. And Joel Zwart as well, but I'm still in therapy. Tonight I've been asked to speak to you about the Barbizon School of landscape painting, and I'm just going to take a step back first to get us to think a little bit about landscape. We tend to take it for granted as if it's always been there as a genre, as a kind of painting. But it really only goes back about 500 years, okay, as a separate kind of entity. So it's relatively new. And so that's one thing that we sort of take for granted. But there's another side of this that's even more telling, and that is I think there's a tendency to see landscapes as if they are neutral, as if they're unbiased, kind of just direct transcriptions of the world. And that's never the case. No matter how naturalistic something is, it's not a pure copy. It's made by somebody. And that artist makes choices, decisions. The artist is grounded not only in their personal convictions, but there are cultural expectations. That the artist is shaping what is seen. In fact, the word landscape, the scape part of it, comes from Dutch. Okay, I won't get involved in too much in there. But what it means is to shape, literally. So it's a land shape, or it's a shaping of the land. And so I want us to bear that in mind as we're looking at the slides and as you enter into the gallery, to think about that idea of shaping spaces or places. And so what we discover is that there's really a significance to a particular location. There's always more than what meets the eye. Now, unlike a portrait or a history painting, a landscape painting is typically something that's sold on the market. Okay, you don't, as an artist, typically get commissions for landscapes like you would a portrait. Okay, so there's a bit of a difference there. And because of that, it's not terribly surprising that most of the landscape paintings are smaller in size. They're going to be made for a domestic setting. Now, what I'm showing you right off the bat violates everything I just said. I'm showing you a work by Constable that was known as being a 6-footer. Okay, that was the nickname for the kind of painting. But in terms of the painting, it's not a backdrop to a religious image. It's not a historical narrative. It's not showing us anything mythological. It's different than, say, a classical landscape. Okay? A classical landscape, what you'd notice is a strong degree of order. The sense that nature is bowing to human will or to human reason. This is a little bit romantic, but it's not romanticism a la Turner either, where you're seeing the sublime quality of nature. This is something more pastoral, something that kind of slows us down. There's this deep appreciation for the ordinary. If it transports us to something mundane, something commonplace or everyday. And I think that's the big kick here with the Haywain, okay, with this work done in 1821 by the English painter Constable, is it looks empirical, true to nature, kind of a matter of fact, and yet what we end up having is something rather slow, tranquil, serene, where we're to appreciate the rural countryside. Now, the painting isn't made for somebody who lives out on a farm. Okay? It's made for somebody who lives in a grimy, dirty city like London. Okay? But it's to give a kind of escape or a kind of nostalgia for a former life, perhaps, or something outside of the city. And I can think of examples like that right here in West Michigan. Okay? I don't know if you've ever noticed, but sometimes when you're traveling down the road, you might see a wagon wheel in the front yard of somebody's house. And you wonder, what's that doing there? Because it's not functioning as part of a wagon. It's just half buried. Or maybe somebody's got an old cart sitting in their front yard. Okay? That's kind of an appeal back to an earlier culture, so to speak, or a rural culture, something outside of Grand Rapids. Okay, or outside of Holland. Maybe makes you think of Borculo or Zealand or something like that. I don't know, okay? But it has that kind of small feel to it. And we do this kind of thing all the time. Okay, not to poke fun of anybody in particular here, but some of you have homes with shutters. And the shutters don't shut. Okay, so why do we have shutters? Because it kind of makes it feel not like a house but a home, maybe a little bit more like a cottage feel. Okay, well, that again is a place away from the city. And that's what Constable is giving us here. Constable knew the farms of East Anglia, okay, but he's making this for somebody who might not. And you get this incredible sense of harmony. There's a dog on the shore that may be barking or at least is watching them ford across the river. And we're like the dog, okay, that we kind of are gazing across as well. You can't see it, but in the weeds there is also a fisherman who is mooring his boat. So there are all these little things that you notice. Now, it's unpretentious, and yet there's a vibrancy, especially in terms of the clouds. Okay, there's this sense of, again, vitality or life. Now, this had a big influence in England, but it had even a bigger impact in France. Because 3 years after this painting was done, it was brought to the Salon in Paris. And artists couldn't believe it, in part because of its scale. Nobody was making landscape paintings this big. And then the subject seemed to be of nothing. You know, kind of a Seinfeld moment, right? It's a painting of nothing. Nothing of note or significance, but then it's of everything. And so a group of artists, after looking at Constable, started making imagery that's analogous. And they're known as the Barbizon School. Now, the name itself comes from a little village, Barbizon. They didn't always work in Barbizon, and they didn't always work together. So the name, the Barbizon School, is a little bit sketchy. Okay, it gives us a little bit of a hint of where they were. It gives us a sense of definition, but it's a little looser than the name implies. Well, anyway, this little village is in the forest of Fontainebleau. And Fontainebleau is where the French kings had a hunting lodge. Okay, so it's in the middle of kind of the woods. It's a place of retreat. It's about 35 miles outside of Paris. And so these artists start working there. And when Dupree's there, of all the possible things he could paint, he just has this person walking over an old bridge, a rustic bridge, with a little bit of cattle there, a few trees. It's nothing special, but that's precisely what makes it special. It's the sense of the extraordinary in the ordinary. It's also kind of nostalgic. It's outside of Paris. The painting, again, is made to be purchased in Paris. Would have been put in somebody's home. But you get that little sense of an escape. The Barbizon artists, sometimes they didn't even refer to the area as Fontainebleau. They would just simply call it Arcadia. Okay? Arcadia is a mythological place where you don't have to work, where you can just write poetry and music and find a lover and relax. Okay? Kind of like West Michigan. No, I mean, it's this sensibility, again, where life is easy. Now, this is, of course, a fabrication, a lie. Any of you who have lived on a farm or near a farm know that, it's a bit of hard work, and there's a little bit of scent involved that you don't really get a sense of with the paintings. But the paintings aren't about that, right? We're going to idealize it a bit because it's to make you want to feel about that space. Rousseau had this to say. He said, Homer and Virgil would not have minded being here, sitting here contemplating their poetry. Okay, so there's that sensibility again, that this is the place to be. that they're recovering something that could be lost. Again, away from industrialization, away from the pollution of the city, a place that's still pure, simple, relaxing. Maybe we have feelings like that too. If you think back on memories, it always seems like the past was simpler than the present. It doesn't seem like it was as busy. And you enjoy maybe little things like, I don't know, for me it would be playing catch. Not Little League, okay, but not something organized, but just hanging out with friends, doing something on a nice evening, or maybe watching fireflies, or just something, again, very simple, direct, that hits you in terms of a slowing down of time. Okay, now when you have that memory, admittedly, there's a little bit of imagination and fantasy involved. It probably is not exactly the way you recall it. That's true, that's part of it. But it's also something that's hard to think about with something like phones, right? It's not only because we didn't have the cell phones then, but because it's, again, something that isn't busy, isn't something that's going to be constantly bombarding our energies. Not that surprisingly, when we look at Barbizon School paintings, a lot of it goes back to 17th century Dutch things again. So 3 years ago, I gave you a presentation on the Hague School, which were Dutch artists looking back at the 17th century. Well, the Barbizon did it before them. And you can see that here in Troyon's work. He had been to The Hague. He saw works by Potter of the Young Bull and so forth. But what I want us to think about here isn't so much that connection, but again, that's the sense of atmosphere, memory, trying to imagine a simpler place and time, sense of tranquility, peace, ease. Have I put you to sleep yet? Okay. I mean, there's just that kind of moment of relaxation. And all of that's important for the artist at hand, namely Alten. Alten went to France. He studied in Paris. He went to the Académie Julian. And there he confronted and worked with people who were associated with the Barbizon School. Okay, now he did this one just prior to going there, but he's already thinking about it. I mean, he's making a choice self-consciously to go to Paris, to learn, saved up his money. He knows what he's doing. And I think, again, it's fascinating to think about this artist who, born in Germany, comes to Grand Rapids, and then he doesn't just stay put. He's always traveling, always learning. He's doing a lot of, well, we call it eclecticism, okay? He's borrowing from lots of sources. He's going to pick up ideas later from Spanish Impressionism, okay? So his style is going to alter in time, but we're still going to see this preoccupation with the everyday. And he gets that from the Barbizon. Okay, so when you look at this work, which is in the gallery, you know, there's this incredible sense of detail, and maybe it looks photographic to you, but bear in mind, they didn't have color photography then. Okay? So there's more going on with color. And also, photographs have a tendency of flattening things out. And there's a richer sense of space, I think, when you see this work. You do get the idea of observation of a place, okay? But it's, again, something that's easily overlooked. He's not ordering it in any profound way, because he wants you to see the little things in life. It's like a small world made cunningly. Or cows grazing by a river. Okay, the presentation of the cows here, he's getting from, again, Barbizon ideas. simpler kind of lifestyle. You see trees that maybe are gnarled or grow anew. There's a sense of regeneration of place. Again, a work that's in the gallery. And this is done, 15, 20 years later. The dense entanglements and the clearings. I mean, this is like if you were looking at Plaster Creek or Rush Creek. And yet he's giving it meaning. Maybe when you were younger, you put your feet in the water and you can remember what it was like to be in that kind of space. Maybe you're chasing crawdads or something, crayfish. Okay? But now, as he's painting these trees, bear in mind, he's working here, Furniture City. The trees are going. Okay, the trees, some of them were used to rebuild Chicago earlier on. This is in the midst of World War I. Again, trees were being used for lumber and so forth to help with the military, with making barracks and so forth. So the trees are waning. Grand Rapids is also growing. And as the population's increasing through lots and lots of immigration in this period, he's showing something that's kind of disappearing. And yet it's paradoxically always with us. The woods define Michigan, his adopted home. More trees were harvested in Michigan than I think any other state at this point. Okay? It's something to kind of bear in mind. If you think about the city of Muskegon, okay, and their art collection, so forth, a lot of it was donated by Hackley, by Walker. Those were lumber barons. Grand Rapids, too, had lumber barons. Unfortunately, the greatest one left. Okay? He went to Chicago and built the Chicago Art Institute. Imagine if he had stayed in Grand Rapids. Okay? Ryerson could have done some magic for us. But what my point is again tonight is, even though this is an artist now who's, he's been to Paris, he hung out there for about a year. This is well over a decade later. He still has that sensibility. He's still fascinated with the simple things of nature. His work is going to become more impressionistic in time. He will study in Spain, the work of Sorolla. He will also be at Old Lyme in Connecticut, where there are American Impressionists. So he's going to do Impressionism, but it'll still be Barbizon. And in some ways that makes a lot of sense, because if we were talking about French Impressionist painters, they too are following Barbizon ideas. So it's one of these kind of curious phenomena that this unpretentious style, which is not heroic, ends up being a major impact in terms of the history of late 19th and early 20th century European and American art. And I think we can see quite readily why he's attracted to that. Okay, that idea of, again, looking at the everyday, the affection for things that are waning. We can get his fascination because we probably have it too. And in a, I think, kind of a strange, profound way, what Alten does is he shows us the distance of the past is something that you can never get rid of. And yet, paradoxically, the past always seems intimate with us. So it's both near and far. There's a near farness and a far nearness, so to speak. And perhaps that's part of the reason the Barbizon School and, again, Alten continue to enchant us. So I'll answer, I guess, a few questions, and then, or do you want me to answer them after? Well, I can do it now, or I can do it later. I guess the boss man says I can do it now. If you have questions, I'm happy to answer them now. And, for that matter, I really want to encourage you to go into the galleries. About like this. But not like Constable. When you have a 6-foot wide painting. Now, today, yeah, that's going to be more commonplace to have an artist making a larger landscape. But I would still say most landscapes are going to be smaller in scale. Also, I should point out these were all done inside, right? So that, even though they look direct, yeah, the artist is making drawings, sketches, but ultimately they're produced in a studio. Okay, question is, were they looking at actual models going through these spaces, or were they imagined? And the answer to that question is going to be really vague, but if I'm going to be truthful, both. Okay, so sometimes what they would do is have the locals kind of parade for them and quickly draw them. Other times they're just adding them later. You don't see them in the original drawing. So it's not a straightforward thing I can answer. Okay. The question is, how did he find out about all these things? I think that, well, first of all, he was born in Germany, okay, in the Rhineland area. And then he came to West Michigan. If I remember correctly, he was on the west side. A lot of German, Polish immigrants were in that area. And then later, I think he moved over by Aquinas. But yeah, he came to West Michigan. He painted furniture as well. Okay, so it wasn't just that he was making, works of art, so to speak. So he's doing decorative work as well. But I think he just, read and was fascinated and wanted to keep learning. And so he traveled quite extensively. When I think about it, he traveled to the Netherlands. He then came back, traveled to France, went back to the Netherlands. He traveled also to Spain. He traveled to Old Lyme in Connecticut. So he had happy feet, so to speak, okay? But he stayed here. And he even says this, I'm paraphrasing, in one of his letters, that, yeah, he could go to New York, but New York's not home. And he just really felt a strong connection to this particular locality. I don't know if I answered, yeah. He needs patrons, right? So, yes, okay, he could afford to do some of these things, but he spent his money on the travel. He tended to study with artists who would make more, how should I put it, naturalistic imagery. So people like the Barbizon artists, the Hague School painters in the Netherlands. It's pretty close to that. Sorolla, who is a Spanish impressionist, had a major impact on him later in his career. So those artists, yes. The French impressionists, not so much. Okay, his work becomes more impressionistic, but it borrows that from a different source. Well, I don't know if it was because of warfare and conflicts and so forth that there wasn't the art. There was still art, but I think what really hit people with Constable was, first and foremost, his clouds. I think they're just extraordinary. And artists looked at those and thought, who looks at the sky like that? And it just really affected the imagination of artists. Delacroix, who is a very well-known romantic painter, just thought this was the cat's meow and just got into it. Now, his own paintings don't really show it, but in his journals you see that. And for that matter, the Impressionists, Monet was a draft dodger, so he's trying to avoid the Franco-Prussian War and goes up to England, and he sees the work of Turner, which has a big influence in terms of, if you think of impressions. But it's also the work of Constable. Constable, we tend to look at him like he's maybe a little bit like Wordsworth, the poet. Yeah, okay, it's good, but it's not really super exciting. It's kind of tranquil. You know, where a lot of us today, I think, even though I've just been talking about how we want to slow things down, we like things that have energy. And it takes an extra effort to really get into Constable, I think. But once you do, it's magical. Oh, yeah. I do too. The National Gallery in London just had a show of Constable. And they brought out a bunch of the studies, and yeah, I'm salivating. It was fantastic. Yeah. Oh, well, thank you. Well, appreciate that. All right, well, I'm going to bring the mic back over to my boss. Okay, here you go.
Thank you, Henry. And as a reminder, we are recording this presentation tonight as we have in past events. So if you want to listen to Henry talk about this again, if you want to go back and listen to him talk about the Hague School, or any Stephen Duran, we have your talk as well recorded. So if you go to MatthiasAlten.com, that all lives there. That's part of the reason the lights have to be up, so we can record it properly. But thank you for coming tonight. Just a reminder. Oh, I'm going the other wrong way, aren't I? There we go. Your support makes all this possible. We have many funds set up around our Alten collection as well as our general art collection here at Grand Valley. If you are interested in learning more about any of those, please find me after this or anybody on our team here at the Art Museum. Thank you for coming. The bar is still open. The galleries are still open. Please stay and enjoy your time tonight. Thank you.